Welcome to Sleep Smart. If you are here, you are ready to rest. Whatever the day has held, whatever is still unfinished, whatever is still turning in your mind, you can set it down now. Just for tonight. It will all be there in the morning. Right now, the only thing you need to do is let yourself be still. Tonight, we are going to tell you a story. A real one. The story of a real man who lived a real and extraordinary life. A life so large and so strange that it reads, in places, like something imagined. His name was Nikola Tesla. You may have heard the name. You may know a little of what he did. But tonight we are going to tell you all of it, from the very beginning. From the thunderstorm on the night he was born, in a small village in the mountains of what is now Croatia, to the quiet hotel room in New York where he spent his last night on Earth surrounded by a city that was running, and still runs today, on electricity he designed. It is a long story. That is the point. There is no hurry here. No one is asking you to follow closely, to remember anything, or to stay awake. If you drift, if the words begin to blur at the edges and the story becomes something softer than story, that is exactly right. That is what this is for. So find your position. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Let your body remember how to be heavy. And when you are ready, we begin. New York City, January 1943. The world was at war. Outside, the city moved with the particular restlessness of a place trying to live normally inside something enormous and frightening. Factories ran through the night. Soldiers moved through Penn Station in their thousands. And by order of the civilian defense authorities, the lights above the 15th floor of every building had been dimmed, pulled back from the skyline so that enemy submarines offshore could not use the glow of Manhattan as a compass. Even Times Square had gone dark. The most electric corner in the world, stripped of its signs and its advertisements and its restless neon, sitting quiet, for the first time anyone could remember, in the ordinary dark of a winter night. On the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker, a window was open. Just a little. Just enough to let the cold air in. In the room behind it, in a chair pulled close to the glass, sat an old man. He was 86 years old. Tall, even now. Thin in the way that suggests a life spent somewhere more interesting than meals. His face was angular, precise, the face of a man who had always looked at the world as if it owed him an explanation. But the eyes, in these last years, had gone quiet. Turned inward. Watching something no one else in the room could see. There was no one else in the room. There almost never was. His name was Nikola Tesla. The room was modest. A bedroom and a small study. On the desk, notebooks, filled across 60 years in a careful hand. On the bedside table, a glass of warm milk. A small jar of honey. A little bread. He ate almost nothing by now, had narrowed his diet down to the simplest things, as if the body had become a minor administrative concern, something to be maintained with the least possible interruption to the work. There was always work. Even now. Even at 86, alone in 2 rented rooms in a hotel on 34th Street, there was always something turning in his mind. On the windowsill, shifting gently in the draft from the open pane, sat a pigeon. He had been feeding pigeons for years, walking to Bryant Park every afternoon, in almost any weather, carrying seed and bread and his considerable patience. He knew individual birds. He had nursed injured ones back to health in this very room, much to the hotel's quiet distress. He had, more than once, been asked to leave other hotels because of the mess they made of his windowsills. He did not consider this a reasonable objection. Among all the birds, over all the years, one had been singular. A white pigeon. Pure white, with light gray tips on her wings. She came to his window every day, he said. She followed him when he moved between rooms. She knew him in the way that certain creatures know the people who have seen them clearly. He spoke about her to a reporter near the end of his life, without embarrassment, without apology, the way a person speaks about something true when they have stopped caring whether it sounds strange. He said, "I have been feeding pigeons, thousands of them, for years. But there was one, a beautiful bird, pure white with light gray tips on her wings. I had only to wish and call her and she would come flying to me. I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman. And she loved me. As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." She had died some years before this January night. He still kept the window open. Hold that image for a moment. A man who had lit the Chicago World's Fair with 100,000 electric lamps. Who had harnessed Niagara Falls. Who had designed the electrical system that was, at this very moment, powering every light in the city below his window, every factory, every hospital, every street lamp pushing back the January dark. Sitting alone on the 33rd floor. Keeping a window open for a bird that would not come. It is a hard image, but it is a true one. The city below did not know he was there. That was, in a way, the central fact of the last chapter of Nikola Tesla's life. The world he had built was running perfectly without him. The alternating current system he had conceived and fought for, the rotating magnetic field he had first visualized while walking through a park in Budapest, the polyphase AC network now carrying power to every electrified city on Earth, all of it humming along, 60 cycles per second, exactly as he had specified. His invention had become invisible in its own success. So essential, so embedded in the fabric of daily life, that people no longer thought of it as having been made by anyone. Electricity came from the wall. It powered things. And the man who had designed the system by which it did this was sitting alone in a hotel room on 34th Street, drinking warm milk and watching the dark sky. On the 7th of January, 1943, Nikola Tesla died in his sleep. The cause was coronary thrombosis, a blood clot in the heart. A maid named Alice Monaghan found him the following morning, entering despite the Do Not Disturb sign that had been on the door for several days. He was lying peacefully. The room was tidy. The notebooks were on the desk. Outside, the city continued. As it does. As it always does, when the people who built it are gone. This is the story of how he got there. Not to that quiet room, that is only the last page. This is the story of what came before. The small stone village in the mountains. The thunderstorm on the night of his birth. The boy who stroked a cat in winter and watched sparks fly from the fur and asked his father, "What is that?" The young man who stopped walking through a park in Budapest, pulled out a stick, and drew in the sand an invention that would change the world, having never touched a single piece of equipment. The ocean crossing with 4 cents in his pocket. The battles. The triumphs. The tower that was built and then torn down for scrap. And the long, quiet journey back to simplicity, to warm milk and open windows and a white pigeon with gray-tipped wings. Imagine traveling backwards through time. Not violently, not in a flash. Gently, the way a tide goes out. You leave New York behind. You leave the 20th century. You pass back through the wars, through the factories, through the great migrations of people crossing oceans with everything they owned in a single bag. The world grows quieter as you travel. Cities thin out. Roads narrow into tracks. Tracks dissolve into grass. You cross the Atlantic. You cross Europe. You move through the folded mountain country at the continent's center, where the rivers run cold and the forests grow right up to the edges of the small stone villages. And eventually, if you go far enough, if you follow the thread all the way back to where it began, you arrive in a valley ringed by dark green hills, where a stream runs fast over smooth rocks, and a church stands white against the mountain, and beside the church, a small wooden house. You have arrived in Smiljan. It is the summer of 1856. The village of Smiljan sits in the region called Lika, in what was then the Austrian Empire, now Croatia. It is small enough that everyone knows everyone. The nearest town, Gospic, is a few kilometers away. The nearest city is a long day's ride. The people here are Serbian, Orthodox in their faith, proud of a heritage that goes back further than the empire that now governs them. 4 generations, their families were settled along this border by Habsburg rulers to serve as frontier guards, a buffer zone between the Austrian Empire and the Ottoman lands to the south. They were given land and given rights, and in return they were expected to provide soldiers. It made them a particular kind of people. Self-reliant. Tough without drama about it. Rooted deeply in land, and language, and faith. Nikola Tesla was one of them. He grew up among them, of them, even as everything in him was quietly aimed at something they had never imagined. At the center of the village stood the Church of Saints Peter and Paul, built of stone in 1765. Its bell tower rose above everything else. Its white walls caught the summer light. Next to it, close enough to hear the bells from every room, stood the parsonage, the house of the priest and his family. This is where Nikola Tesla was born. The date was the 10th of July, 1856, or more precisely, the final minutes of the 9th becoming the first minutes of the 10th. The exact stroke of midnight. That uncertain border between one day and the next. He arrived at the turning of the day. And on the night he arrived, the sky above Smiljan was not calm. It was high summer, and the thunderstorms that move through the mountains of Lika in those weeks are not gentle things. The sky splits open. Lightning finds the hilltops. Thunder follows so fast after the flash that by the time your heart has settled, the next bolt is already arriving. The kind of storm that makes animals press against each other in barns. The kind that fills a room with white light and makes the walls feel thin. On the night Nikola Tesla was born, one of those storms was directly overhead. In the room where his mother, Duka, was giving birth, the lightning came through the windows in sheets. The midwife attending the birth was afraid of storms, as most people were, in 1856, before the work of men like Tesla would eventually make lightning less mysterious. She wrung her hands and watched the sky flash, and at some point during the labor she said what the storm had made her think. This child, she said, will be a child of darkness. She meant it as a warning. Something was being marked here. Something announced. Whatever this child would be, the sky was choosing this night for a reason. Duka Tesla, in the midst of giving birth, replied without a pause. No, she said. He will be a child of light. It is a story, a piece of family legend, told and retold and polished across the years. We cannot know exactly what was said in that room, but the exchange survived. Tesla himself knew it. It was one of the first things people said when they tried to explain who he was and where he had come from. And the reason a story survives is not always because it is perfectly, literally true. Sometimes it survives because it is true in the way that matters more, because it captures something about a person that the plain facts cannot quite reach. Nikola Tesla would spend his life doing something that looked, to many people around him, like catching lightning and making it obey. He would insist, against real opposition and real ridicule, that the invisible forces of nature could be understood, could be harnessed and directed and made to serve. He would spend his entire life being a child of light. And being seen, by those who were afraid of what he was doing as something darker. So perhaps both women were right. The Tesla household was led by his father, Milutin, a Serbian Orthodox priest and a man of remarkable learning. He was a poet and writer who contributed to literary journals. He spoke multiple languages and maintained a personal library that was unusually large for a village parsonage. He had a memory so prodigious that he joked, according to his son, that if the great classical works were ever lost, he could restore them from memory alone. From the time Nikola was small, Milutin ran the household like a school in the best sense, not rigid and punishing, but alive with the pleasure of thinking. He set his children daily exercises, guessing one another's thoughts, finding the flaw in an argument, memorizing long passages and repeating them exactly, solving calculations without paper. Tesla wrote later that these lessons were intended to strengthen memory and reason and develop the critical sense, and were undoubtedly very beneficial. He learned to think rigorously before he learned to read. His mother, Duca, was something else entirely. Born in 1822, the eldest of 8 children, she had lost her own mother to blindness when she was just 16 years old. With no one else to take charge, she had raised her 7 younger siblings herself, managed the house, the food, the care, the keeping of everything together, until she married Milutin in 1847. She had never received a formal education, and yet she invented things. Not small repairs, genuine inventions. She built household tools from whatever was available. She designed and constructed her own looms, weaving cloth of extraordinary intricacy from thread she had spun from plants she had grown herself. She planted the seeds, raised the plants, separated the fibers, spun the thread, and wove it into the clothing and furnishings of the home. Most of what the Tesla family wore and sat on and slept under was made by her hands. Tesla wrote of her, "My mother was an inventor of the first order, and would, I believe, have achieved great things had she not been so remote from modern life and its manifold opportunities." Remote. Not uneducated, remote. Isolated from the infrastructure that would have allowed the full expression of what she was capable of. It is a remarkably clear-eyed thing for a son to say about his mother's circumstances. And it tells you something about how well Tesla understood the relationship between talent and opportunity, a lesson he had learned by watching her. She also could not read, and yet she had memorized, by ear alone, entire volumes of Serbian epic poetry, thousands of lines of verse, the great cycles of an oral tradition passed down across centuries from singer to singer, held not in books but in memory, in the voice, in the body. She could recite them from beginning to end without faltering. Having never read a word of them, Tesla inherited this. Directly, completely. He would famously memorize entire books. He would hold 3-dimensional mechanical systems in his mind with the precision of a blueprint. He would conduct complete experiments inside his own imagination, running inventions through every test he could devise, without writing a single calculation on paper. The mechanism, the precise, capacious, unfaltering memory, was his mother's. He knew this. He said so. The 4th child, born at midnight in a thunderstorm, in a small wooden house beside a white stone church, in a mountain village most of the world had never heard of, with a poet priest for a father and an unrecognized inventor for a mother. This was the beginning. There is something we need to understand about Nikola Tesla before we follow him out into the larger world. Something about the way his mind worked. Something that was always there from the very beginning, before the laboratories, before the patents, before the fame. Something that was, in his own words, both a gift and a torment. It began with the images. Tesla described it in his autobiography with the careful precision of a man who had spent years trying to understand something that defied easy explanation. He called it a peculiar affliction. In his boyhood, he wrote, he suffered from the appearance of images, often accompanied by strong flashes of light, which marred the sight of real objects and interfered with his thought and action. These were not daydreams. Not the ordinary wandering of an idle mind. They were involuntary, vivid, and insistent, real scenes he had actually witnessed, replaying without invitation, refusing to be dismissed. When someone spoke a word to him, the image of the thing that word described would appear before his eyes with such completeness that he sometimes could not tell whether what he was seeing was physically there or not. He reached out and passed his hand through images. They did not disappear. He wrote that this caused him great discomfort and anxiety. He consulted psychologists throughout his life. None of them could satisfactorily explain it. To find relief, he discovered a method by trial and error. He would fix his attention on something calming, some quiet, familiar scene he had already seen, and use it to push away the unwanted image. This worked, for a time. But his supply of comforting scenes was limited. He was a child in a small village. He had not seen much of the world. His reel, he wrote, ran out. So he went further. He began to make excursions, in his own words, beyond the limits of the small world of which I had knowledge. He taught himself to imagine places he had never been. Cities, countries, landscapes utterly unlike the hills of Licker. At first these invented scenes were blurred and insubstantial. They fled when he tried to hold them. But he persisted. With the same patient discipline his father had built in him through years of daily mental exercises, he kept returning to the imagined scenes, and gradually they firmed. They gained in strength and distinctness, he wrote, and finally assumed the concreteness of real things. And then something remarkable happened. Tesla began to travel. Every night, alone in the dark of his room in Smiljan, he went on journeys in his mind. He saw new places. He walked through cities that did not exist. He formed, as he wrote later, friendships and acquaintances that were just as dear to him as those in actual life, and not a bit less intense. He lived in two worlds at once. The outer world of the village and the church and the mountains, and an interior world of extraordinary richness that was entirely his own construction, entirely responsive to his attention, entirely as vivid as anything he had ever seen with open eyes. This interior world became, over years of patient cultivation, the most powerful tool he would ever possess. Because Tesla did not invent the way other inventors invented. Other inventors drew things. They sketched and scribbled and built rough models and adjusted with their hands and failed and tried again. Tesla built inside his head. When an idea for a machine came to him, he held it in imagination, in that same vivid interior space he had been developing since childhood, and he ran it there. He watched it turn. He listened for the sound it would make. He looked for the places where metal would wear, where a bolt might loosen, where friction would eventually build. He adjusted components, corrected weaknesses, all without touching a single physical object. He wrote, "I do not rush into actual work. When I get an idea, I start at once building it up in my imagination. I change the construction, make improvements, and operate the device in my mind. It is absolutely immaterial to me whether I run my turbine in thought or test it in my shop. The results are the same." And then, only when the machine was complete, when it had been run and tested and corrected in the full three-dimensional theater of his mind, only then did he build it. And when he built it, it worked. Not approximately. Not after adjustment. It worked because it had already worked hundreds of times, in the space behind his eyes. But before this became power, it was suffering. A winter evening in Smiljan. Cold and unusually dry, even for liquor. The young Nikola reached out in the dusk and stroked the back of the family cat, a black cat named Makak, whom he called the fountain of my enjoyment, his constant companion through childhood. Makak's back erupted in light. A sheet of light, Tesla wrote, and his hand moving through the fur produced a shower of crackling sparks loud enough to be heard across the house. His father identified it immediately. "This is nothing but electricity," my Luton said. "The same thing you see through the trees in a storm." His mother said, "Stop playing with the cat. He might start a fire." But the boy was not listening. He was thinking. He wrote, decades later, that he had sat there turning something over in his mind. A question that arrived with the sparks and never fully left him. Is nature a gigantic cat? He thought. If so, who strokes its back? It can only be God, he concluded. Here I was, he wrote, only 3 years old and already philosophizing. Day after that evening, he wrote, he asked himself the same question. What is electricity? He would spend the next 6 decades finding out. He was a person of obsessions, compulsions, and intense sensitivities that made ordinary life quietly difficult in ways that those around him rarely understood. He counted his steps. Always. He calculated the volume of his food before eating it. He required things, rooms, numbers, arrangements, to conform to rules that existed only inside his own mind, and felt genuinely disturbed when they did not. He had a powerful, inexplicable aversion to pearls. He was deeply afraid of germs. He disliked touching hair. We would recognize these patterns today. Then, there was no vocabulary for them. He simply lived inside them, managed them as quietly as he could, and carried on. Because the same quality that made certain things unbearable was the quality that let him hold a complete rotating motor in 3 dimensions inside his mind and run it to exhaustion without touching a component. The sensitivity was the gift. The affliction and the power were the same thing. He had not chosen any of it. He had been given a particular mind, by his mother's blood, by his father's training, by the mountains and the stream and the church bell and the winter night when a cat's fur crackled with light. He was a boy in a village. Outside, Smiljan settled into the dark. The stream ran. The mountains held their ground. The church stood quiet beside the house. Somewhere in that house, in the particular interior darkness that was entirely his own, the boy who had been born at midnight in a storm was watching images move across his mind like weather. Watching, learning, beginning, without knowing it yet, to direct them. The first outline of something enormous was stirring in the dark. He didn't know what it was yet, but it was there. He had always been someone who needed to touch things to understand them. Not in the way most children need to touch things, picking up and putting down, the short attention of curiosity, but in the way an engineer touches a machine, with the specific intention of understanding how it works, what drives it, where the force comes from, and what happens when you change one thing. From the time he was old enough to be unsupervised, Nikola Tesla had been taking the world apart to see what was inside. His childhood inventions were small, but they were real. At the age of 5, still in Smiljan, he built a water wheel at the stream near the house. Not a model, not a toy, but a working wheel designed to be turned by the current. It was bladeless, unlike any wheel he had seen in the countryside, and it actually worked. He found great pleasure in operating it, he wrote later, the satisfaction of having conceived something and made it function. He fashioned pop guns from hollow tubes. He built a crossbow. He made hooks for fishing without the barb, his own design. which did not catch any fish. And then there was the motor. He collected 16 June bugs, the large, buzzing beetles of a liquor summer, and glued them in a row to a spindle with a small wheel attached. When the bugs tried to fly, their wings drove the wheel. The motor ran. He was delighted. A visiting boy arrived, looked at the June bugs, began eating them, one by one. Tesla was so revolted he could not touch a June bug for the rest of his life. But the motor had worked. When the family moved to Gospic in 1862, the boy who had known every path and stone in Smiljan found himself in a larger, busier, more complicated world. He missed the mountains. He missed the stream. He was not, at first, happy. But school opened something in him. In the classroom at Gospic, there were mechanical models, small devices demonstrating physical principles. Tesla studied them with the intensity of a person who does not look at a thing but into it. He was particularly drawn to water turbines. He built several of his own and found great pleasure in operating them. Then, in that same schoolroom, he came across a description of Niagara Falls. He had never seen them. He had barely left the mountains of liquor. But he read the description, and in the way his mind always worked, he immediately pictured it, a great wheel, driven by those falls, turning with the force of water that had been building since before anyone alive had been born. He told his uncle. One day, he said, "I will go to America and carry out this scheme." His uncle had no use for this kind of talk. He rebuked him more than once. But Tesla remembered. He always remembered. In 1870, at the age of 14, he moved to Karlovac to attend the Higher Real Gymnasium, the high school where classes were taught in German. A physics professor there changed his life. The professor performed demonstrations of electricity, the mysterious phenomena, Tesla called them. They made him want to know more of this wonderful force. He performed integral calculus in his head with such speed that his teachers accused him of cheating. He completed the 4-year course in 3 years, graduating in 1873 at 17. He came home. What happened next nearly ended everything. Shortly after returning to Smiljan, Nikola Tesla contracted cholera. In the 1870s, cholera was not a manageable illness. It was violent and rapid and, in many cases, fatal. Tesla was bedridden for 9 months. 9 months. He came close to death multiple times. The household organized itself around his survival. Duca, who had raised 7 siblings when her mother went blind, who worked from 4 in the morning until 11 at night, who had met every difficulty the world had sent her with her hands and her intelligence and her absolute refusal to give in, sat with her son and waited. During the worst of it, his father came into the room. Tesla still saw his face, pale, trying to project a calm he did not feel. And Tesla, in that extremity, the clarity that comes to a person who believes they may be dying and has nothing left to lose, said what he had always wanted to say and never dared. "Perhaps I may get well," he said, "if you will let me study engineering." My Lieutenant Tesla looked at his son, the priest who had wanted the boy to follow him into the clergy, the father who had always imagined one future for the child who had arrived at midnight in a storm. "You will go to the best technical institution in the world," he said. And Tesla knew he meant it. He wrote later that a heavy weight was lifted from him. Not from his body, the body still had months of recovery ahead. But from something deeper. The promise had been made. He recovered. Slowly, incompletely at first, then with the gradual return of strength that comes to a person who has decided they have work to do. He later said that the writings of Mark Twain, whose humor reached him in those months in a way that nothing else did, had helped him pull through. Many years later, he would meet Twain in his New York laboratory and tell him this story. Twain, by all accounts, wept. In 1874, his father insisted on a year of outdoor recovery before engineering school. Tesla consented reluctantly, then discovered what the mountains had always offered him, the particular combination of physical exertion and open space that lets a mind run at full speed without burning itself out. He explored the mountain country wearing hunter's garb, a bundle of books under his arm. He thought and planned and conceived ideas, most of them wrong, he admitted later, the vision clear but the knowledge of principles still limited. But the habit of continuous mental invention deepened. The practice of holding a problem in the mind, turning it over, running it through every variation, this became, in those mountain months, the most reliable tool he possessed. In 1875, at the age of 19, Nikola Tesla enrolled at the Imperial Royal Technical College in Graz, Austria, on a military frontier scholarship. The promise had been kept. The next chapter was beginning. At Graz, Tesla was extraordinary. In his first year, he never missed a single lecture. He passed 9 examinations, nearly twice as many as required. He worked, by his own account, from 3 in the morning until 11 at night, no Sundays or holidays accepted. He started a Serbian cultural club. He earned the highest grades the institution offered. The dean of the technical faculty wrote to his father, "Your son is a star of first rank." Tesla was mortified, he wrote, when his father made light of those hard-won honors. But it was in his second year that something happened which would set the course of the rest of his life. Professor Jacob Poschel was demonstrating a Gram dynamo, a device that could operate both as a motor and as a generator, one of the most advanced pieces of electrical equipment of the era. While the machine ran, Tesla noticed something. The brushes that made electrical contact with the rotating parts were sparking badly. It was an inefficiency built into the design. The commutator that directed current through the machine was the source of the sparking, and the sparking was the source of the loss. Tesla looked at the machine and said, quietly, that it might be possible to run a motor without commutators, without the brushes, without the mechanical switching altogether. Professor Poschel stopped. He turned to the class. He delivered a careful, patient, slightly amused lecture on why this idea was impossible, why it was, in essence, equivalent to perpetual motion, a thing nature simply did not allow. He concluded by saying, "Mr. Tesla may accomplish great things, but he certainly will never do this." The class noted Tesla's expression. Tesla said nothing, but he had not stopped thinking about it. He would not stop thinking about it for the next 4 years. Those were not easy years. At the end of his second year at Graz, Tesla lost his military frontier scholarship when the frontier was reorganized. Without the scholarship, the money ran out. He fell into gambling, a habit that would haunt him on and off for years to come. He gambled his allowance, then his tuition money. He won it back and returned the balance to his family. He did not sit for examinations in his third year. He left Graz in December 1878 without graduating, severing contact with his family entirely, too ashamed to tell them what had happened. His friends assumed he had drowned in the river Mur. His father died in April 1879, at the age of 60, before he and Nikola could fully repair the distance that had grown between them. After his father's death, Tesla found a bundle of letters from his Graz professors, addressed to Milutin, warning that unless Tesla were removed from the school he would die through overwork. His father had never told him. He drifted. Prague, briefly. Budapest, in January 1881, where he hoped to find work at a new telephone exchange that hadn't been set up yet. He found work at the Central Telegraph Office instead, starting as a draftsman on such a low wage he said later he was ashamed to mention the number. And then, in Budapest, the obsession returned with a force that overwhelmed him. He had not stopped thinking about the motor, about the commutator problem, about what Professor Poschel had said was impossible. The problem had been running in the back of his mind through the gambling and the failure and the grief and the drifting, patient and insistent, waiting for him to come back to it. Now he came back. He came back with everything he had. He worked on it day and night, mentally, no equipment, no laboratory, just the problem in his mind and the peculiar gift of being able to hold a complete machine in his imagination and test it from every angle. The effort took a toll. His senses became painfully acute. A fly landing on a table sounded like a thunderclap. A clock ticking across a room was unbearable. He needed to avoid bright light. He could feel the vibration of the floor through the soles of his shoes. He was, in the most clinical sense, unwell. Worn down by years of extraordinary mental effort without adequate rest, without stability, without the resources his mind required. His friend Antal Szigeti, who had stayed close through all of it, insisted on exercise. Walks. Fresh air. Gradually, the worst of it passed. The mind settled, a little. The problem was still there. It was February 1882. A late afternoon. The sun was going down over the city. Tesla and Szigeti were walking through the city park in Budapest. Tesla was reciting. He had memorized entire books by heart, in multiple languages, and Goethe's Faust was among them. He began a particular passage. The sun, it speaks, as immemorial it has spoken, he described it later himself. The sun was just setting, reminding him of that glorious passage, and as he uttered the words, as the light was changing and the evening was coming in. The idea came like a flash of lightning. He stopped walking. He picked up a stick. He drew in the sand. Not a rough sketch, a diagram. Complete. The solution to the problem he had been carrying since a lecture hall in Graz 4 years before. The rotating magnetic field. Not a commutator directing current into a rotor. Not mechanical contact, not brushes, not sparking. Instead, multiple currents, slightly out of phase with one another, creating a magnetic field that rotated on its own, pulling a rotor around with it, smoothly, continuously, without any physical contact at all. Pure rotating magnetism. Driving pure rotation. He showed Szigeti the diagrams. He described what he was seeing, the motor running in his mind, turning perfectly, exactly as it should. Szigeti looked at the sand. Looked at Tesla. Then looked at the sky, where there was nothing to see. But Tesla could see it. He could see it as clearly as he could see the park around him. A complete machine, working, silent, efficient. The thing Professor Poschel had told his class was impossible, drawn in the sand of a Budapest park at dusk by a 25-year-old man reciting German poetry. He would later write that the drawings he made in that sand were the same diagrams he presented 6 years later to the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, the same diagrams that would introduce the rotating magnetic field to the scientific world. Nothing had changed between the sand and the lecture hall. The machine had been complete from the first moment, because it had already been running, for years, in the space behind his eyes. He stood in the park as the light went. The city moved around him. Budapest in the early evening, the lamps coming on, people walking home, ordinary life in all its ordinary motion. And in the middle of it, a young man with a stick standing over a drawing in the sand, holding in his mind something that would change every city, every home, every life on the surface of the planet. He didn't know that yet. He just knew the machine worked. He just knew, for the first time in 4 years, that the problem was solved. In 1882, Nikola Tesla arrived in Paris. He was 25 years old. He spoke 8 languages. He had a complete rotating magnetic field motor in his imagination, every component, every dimension, already tested and refined in the interior theater of his mind. And he had no idea yet how long it would take for the world to be ready for it. He went to work for the Continental Edison Company, Thomas Edison's European operation, repairing and improving the direct current power systems being installed across the city. He was exceptionally good at it. The same quality that had made his professors at Graz both amazed and alarmed, the ability to hold an entire electrical system in his mind simultaneously, to diagnose problems other engineers needed diagrams to understand, to see the solution before anyone else in the room had properly understood the question, made him the best engineer the company had. He was promoted quickly. Sent to Strasbourg in 1883 to repair a failed DC installation. He fixed it. He also, in Strasbourg, secretly constructed the world's first AC induction motor, built in his spare time, largely from memory, proving to himself what he already knew, that the machine he had drawn in the sand in Budapest was not a vision. It was a working device. But the Continental Edison Company was not interested in alternating current. The company ran on direct current. The company's entire European expansion depended on direct current. There was no one in Paris who wanted to hear that everything they had built was already obsolete. Tesla understood that if the motor was going to change the world, he needed to go somewhere else. His manager in Paris, a man named Charles Batchelor, one of Edison's most trusted lieutenants, who had helped build Edison's electrical empire across Europe, agreed. He sent Tesla to America with a letter of introduction to Edison himself. The letter, as it was later described by those who saw it, was short. It read, "My dear Edison, I know 2 great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." Tesla sailed for New York in June 1884. On the crossing, he was robbed. By the time the ship reached the harbor, he had 4 cents in his pocket. He had his own handwritten poems. A sketch of a flying machine. The calculations for the AC motor held not on paper but in his mind. And the letter. He arrived at the docks and looked out at New York, enormous, chaotic, loud beyond anything he had experienced in the quieter cities of Central Europe. He had very little English. He had almost no money. He was 28 years old. He found Edison's offices and presented the letter. Thomas Edison was, in 1884, the most famous inventor in America, possibly in the world. He had given the world the phonograph. He had given the world a practical incandescent light bulb. He had built the Pearl Street generating station in Lower Manhattan 2 years earlier, the first centralized electrical power station in the United States, sending direct current electricity to a handful of blocks. He was brilliant, self-made, and absolutely certain that direct current was the future of electrical power. Edison read Batchelor's letter. He looked at the young Serbian standing before him. He offered him a job. Tesla worked for Edison for nearly a year. They were, in almost every way, opposites. Edison was an empiricist. He worked by trial and enormous, relentless error, testing thousands of variations until something worked, driven by instinct and extraordinary persistence. He was suspicious of theory, of mathematics that led you somewhere before you had actually tried anything. He had famously said, "I never did anything worth doing by accident. None of my inventions came by accident." Tesla's method was the opposite. He solved the problem completely in his mind before he touched a single component. He considered building a model before he understood the solution to be a waste of everyone's time. They could not fully understand each other. But Edison recognized talent when he saw it, and Tesla's talent was unmistakable. Tesla worked long hours, from morning until late at night, which was simply how both men operated. He diagnosed problems other engineers had given up on. He redesigned systems that were underperforming. He was, within months, one of the most valuable engineers in the Edison machine works. Then came the offer. Edison told Tesla there was $50,000 waiting for him if he could successfully redesign the company's DC dynamos. $50,000 was a significant sum. It was the equivalent of more than $1 million today. And Tesla needed money. He accepted. He worked. For several months he applied the same total commitment he had brought to everything else in his life, starting before dawn, working past midnight, improving the DC generators until they were significantly better than anything Edison's engineers had produced. He completed the work. He went to Edison. He said, "I have done what you asked." Edison looked at him. He smiled. "When you become a full-fledged American," he said, "you will appreciate an American joke." There was no money. There had never been any money. It had been a motivational technique, a way of pushing a talented employee harder. The $50,000 was a joke. Tesla did not find it funny. He resigned immediately. What followed was one of the more humbling episodes in the life of a man who had already had several. He spent time working as a day laborer, digging ditches for the Edison Company, in the streets of the city he had come to with 4 cents and a letter. He did not complain about this, or not much. He did what needed to be done and continued thinking about the motor. The motor was always there. In 1887, backed by a small group of investors, Tesla finally established his own laboratory. He built the machines he had been carrying in his mind. He wrote later, "The motors I built there were exactly as I had imagined them. I made no attempt to improve the design, but merely reproduced the pictures as they appeared to my vision, and the operation was always as I expected." In 1888, he filed the patents, 7 of them, covering the complete polyphase alternating current system: the motor, the generator, the transformer, the full architecture of a power network that could transmit electricity not just around a city block but across a continent. The patents, as those who reviewed them remarked, were unlike most patents. They contained no challenges, no unresolved questions. They were complete. They were the most valuable patents in electrical engineering since the telephone. George Westinghouse came to see Tesla in 1888. Westinghouse was a serious man, a businessman and engineer of real ability, who had already made a fortune with the air brake he had invented for railways and who understood, in a way that Edison did not, or would not, that alternating current was not just a competing technology. It was a better technology. The fundamental difference was simple. Direct current, Edison's system, could only be transmitted over short distances before it lost too much energy to be useful. A DC power plant could serve buildings within a mile or so. To power a city, you needed dozens of generating stations, scattered across it like a patchwork. Alternating current could be transmitted over much greater distances, stepped up to high voltage for the journey, then stepped back down at the destination. A single generating plant, in the right location, could supply power to an entire region. This was not a marginal improvement. It was the difference between something useful and something that could change the world. Westinghouse bought Tesla's patents. The terms were later described in various ways by various sources: large sum upfront, a monthly salary, royalties on every unit of electrical capacity sold. What is clear is that Tesla, for the first time in his life, had money. Real money. And Westinghouse had the system he needed. Edison saw the deal. And Edison declared war. He could not afford to let AC succeed. His entire enterprise, his factories, his power stations, his investors, his reputation, his considerable personal fortune was built on direct current. If alternating current became the standard, everything he had built became obsolete. So he did what powerful people do when a better idea threatens their position. He mounted a campaign. Not a scientific campaign, a fear campaign. He began a series of public demonstrations designed to convince the American public that alternating current was lethally dangerous. His engineers killed dogs and cats with it, in front of reporters, to prove the point. He lobbied to have alternating current adopted as the method for the newly introduced electric chair, specifically because he wanted the public to associate AC electricity with execution. He coined a new word, Westinghoused. As in, the condemned man was Westinghoused. He sent an assistant, Harold Brown, to conduct demonstrations across the country. He wrote to newspapers and lobbied officials. He issued warnings so dramatic they read now like the warnings of a man who knows he is losing. Just as certain as death, Edison said, Westinghouse will kill a customer within 6 months after he puts in a system of any size. He was wrong. The physics were not on his side. The economics were not on his side. And in 1893, the argument would be settled publicly, visibly, and beyond any further dispute, in front of millions of people, in a city that had been built in a matter of months on the shore of Lake Michigan. But before we get there, before the lights come on over the White City, it is worth sitting with what Tesla had done in the years since he arrived at those docks with 4 cents and a letter from a man in Paris. He had been robbed on the crossing. He had dug ditches in the streets of New York. He had been told his greatest idea was a joke, though that was a different kind of joke, and he had kept going. Not from stubbornness, exactly. Not from the kind of pride that insists on proving people wrong. But from something simpler and more durable than either, the knowledge that the machine worked. He had seen it work in Budapest, drawn in the sand at dusk with a stick. He had built it in Strasbourg in secret and watched it run exactly as it should. He had reproduced it in his New York laboratory from the pictures in his mind, and it had worked, as it always worked. A thing that works does not need its inventor to be stubborn. It only needs time. Time was arriving. In 1888, the same year Westinghouse bought the patents, Tesla presented his polyphase alternating current system to the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, a formal scientific address, the kind that changes the record permanently. The same diagrams he had drawn in the sand in Budapest. Now in front of the leading electrical engineers in America. They understood what they were looking at. The questions after his address were, by accounts of those present, not the questions of skeptics. They were the questions of people trying to understand something they knew was important. One engineer, after the lecture, said simply, "This is the most important development in electrical engineering in years." Edison did not attend. The war continued through the late 1880s and into the 1890s, in newspapers, in courtrooms, in the laboratories and generating stations where both systems were being installed and tested in cities across the country. The public followed it with the fascination of people watching something they do not entirely understand but can sense is consequential. And underneath all the noise, the newspaper headlines, the public demonstrations, the Edison Company's campaign of fear, Westinghouse counterarguments, the legal battles over patents and priority, underneath all of it, the physics continued to be what they were. Alternating current could go further. Alternating current was cheaper to distribute. Alternating current could power larger machines. The war would be settled on those facts. It was already being settled. Tesla worked in his laboratory on Fifth Avenue, filling notebooks with experiments and ideas that reached well beyond the motor and the generator, into the behavior of high-frequency electrical fields, into the possibilities of wireless transmission, into questions that the rest of the world would not begin to catch up with for decades. The motor was built. The patents were filed. The war was already, quietly, being won. He worked. He always worked. Outside, New York hummed with electricity, mostly still DC, mostly still Edison's. But the balance was shifting. And somewhere to the west, in a city that did not yet exist, the decision was coming. In the autumn of 1892, the organizers of the world's Columbian Exposition sent out a call for bids. The fair was to be held in Chicago the following year, a celebration of the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the Americas. It would be the largest public event in American history to that point. Hundreds of buildings across 600 acres of parkland on the shore of Lake Michigan. 27 million visitors were expected over its 6-month run. And at its heart, the thing that would make it unlike any fair that had come before, it would be illuminated by electricity. The contract to light it was worth a great deal. More than money, whoever won this contract would be demonstrating their system to the world in front of the largest audience American technology had ever attracted. 2 bids came in. General Electric, backed by J.P. Morgan, built on Thomas Edison's direct current system, offered to do it for over $1 million. When that was rejected as excessive, they came back with $554,000. The Westinghouse Company, armed with Nikola Tesla's alternating current patents, bid $399,000. Westinghouse won. Edison was furious. He refused to allow Tesla and Westinghouse to use his patented light bulbs. It was the kind of move a person makes when they know they are losing and have run out of better options. Westinghouse engineers designed a new bulb, a double-stopper design that sidestepped Edison's patents entirely. Edison sued. He lost. The work proceeded. Throughout the winter of 1892 and into 1893, the fair was being built on the southern shore of Lake Michigan. The architect Daniel Burnham oversaw the construction of 200 buildings, neoclassical structures with white stucco facades that caught the light and earned the whole complex its nickname before a single lamp had been lit. The White City. Tesla's system was woven through all of it. 12,000 horsepower AC polyphase generators, the largest ever built at that time, were assembled in the machinery building. Hundreds of thousands of meters of cable ran beneath the grounds. The wiring for each building was done to specifications derived from Tesla's patents. The whole enterprise consumed, when fully lit, 3 times as much electricity as the entire city of Chicago at that moment. Tesla himself was there. In the Westinghouse exhibit hall, he demonstrated his AC system to visitors. Motors, generators, transformers, fluorescent lamps, vacuum tubes illuminated through wireless transmission. He passed high-frequency AC current through his own body to light a lamp held in his hand without any wire connecting them. The crowds were speechless. On the 1st of May, 1893, President Grover Cleveland walked to the ceremonial button that had been wired through the fair's electrical system to the generators in the machinery hall. Around him, hundreds of thousands of people waited. He pressed the button. 100,000 electric lamps came on simultaneously. Hold that moment. 100,000 lamps. All at once. Powered by alternating current. By the system that a professor in Graz had told his class would never work. By the machine drawn in sand in a Budapest park a decade before. By the patents filed by a man who had arrived at these shores with 4 cents in his pocket. One writer who was present described the moment as receiving a sudden vision of heaven. The crowd did not cheer immediately. First, there was silence. The silence of people looking at something they had never seen before and did not yet have words for. The buildings, designed to gleam white in daylight, took on an entirely different quality in the electric night, luminous, weightless, reflected in the lagoons between them, their outlines traced in light the way stars trace constellations in a clear sky. The canals and fountains sparkled. The walkways were defined by lamp after lamp. The great dome at the center of the complex glowed as if lit from within by something it had swallowed. A reporter for the Chicago Tribune wrote later, "Look from a distance at night upon the broad spaces it fills, and it is as if the earth and sky were transformed by the immeasurable wands of colossal magicians." 27 million people came to the fair during its 6 months. For most of them, it was the first time they had ever seen electric light. For most of them, it changed what they thought was possible. Tesla walked through the grounds that evening. He did not say much, by accounts of those with him. There was not much to say. He was 36 years old. He had come to this country 9 years earlier with almost nothing. He had dug ditches in its streets. He had been told his ideas were impractical, dangerous, the dreams of a man who did not understand how the real world worked. Now 100,000 lamps were burning in the city's evening air on his current. The war was not officially over. There were still battles ahead. But standing in the electric light of the White City, looking at a crowd of people whose faces were illuminated by something he had made, it was clear which way it was going. It had always been clear. He had known since Budapest. There is a picture he had seen as a child. Not a memory, exactly, he had never seen the falls themselves. But somewhere in his schoolroom in Gospic, in one of the books or periodicals that reached even that small town in the mountains of Licker, there had been a picture. Niagara Falls. He had looked at it for a long time. He wrote later that he had been fascinated by the description and had pictured in his imagination a big wheel run by the falls. He had told his uncle that he would go to America and carry out this scheme. His uncle had no use for this kind of talk. But the boy had remembered. Niagara Falls drops more than 50 meters in a curtain of water so vast that the sound of it carries for miles and the mist it throws into the air can be seen from a great distance. Americans had dreamed of harnessing it for power since the 1700s. The first sawmill near the falls was built in 1725. But the problem was always the same. You could capture the mechanical force of the falling water and convert it into energy right there at the falls. What you could not do was send that energy anywhere useful. Direct current could not travel the distance. The city of Buffalo, the nearest large city, 26 miles to the south, might as well have been on another continent. Until alternating current made the journey possible. In 1893, the same year the White City blazed with AC light, the contract to harness Niagara Falls was awarded. Westinghouse won it, again outbidding Edison, again using Tesla's patents. The backers of the project were extraordinary: J.P. Morgan, John Jacob Astor, Lord Rothschild, W.K. Vanderbilt, some of the wealthiest men in the world, placing their faith in a system of electricity that a decade earlier had been dismissed as impractical, dangerous, and theoretically impossible. Construction began immediately and lasted 3 years. Workers dug tunnels 200 feet long and 18 feet wide through solid rock beneath the falls, diverting the river's force into turbines that would convert the falling water's energy into rotation, and rotation into electricity. The turbines were the largest ever built. The generators coupled to them, built to Tesla's specifications, produced alternating current at 2,200 volts. To send it to Buffalo, the voltage was stepped up to 11,000 volts for the journey, a transformation made possible by Tesla's own transformer designs. At the Buffalo substation, it was stepped back down to the voltages homes and factories and streets could use. The whole architecture, generate, step up, transmit, step down, distribute, was exactly the system Tesla had conceived in his mind while walking through a park in Budapest in 1882. Not approximately. Exactly. Tesla himself did not visit the plant during construction. He was occupied in his New York laboratory with the experiments in high-frequency current that were pulling his mind toward the next horizon, toward wireless transmission, toward things that even the people who admired him found extraordinary. And in 1895, a fire broke out in his laboratory. It destroyed everything. Years of equipment, records, experiments, prototypes. The physical evidence of a decade of work, gone in a single night. He did not speak publicly about it much. He was not a man who dwelled. He rebuilt what he could, replaced what he could not, and continued. But those who knew him said that after the fire something in him was different, quieter in a way that had less to do with grief than with the knowledge that things he had built with his hands could be taken from him. The things in his mind could not. On November 16, 1896, the switch was thrown at the Niagara Falls power plant. It was midnight. Alternating current generated by Tesla's system, from the force of water that had been falling for longer than any human civilization had existed, flowed through the line to Buffalo. The city's lights came on. Its streetcars ran. 26 miles from the falls. The first city in history to be powered by long-distance hydroelectric transmission. At the opening ceremony the following January, Tesla spoke. He was 40 years old. He spoke of what had been built at Niagara not only as an engineering achievement but as a monument, the word he used. "We have many a monument of past ages," he said. "We have the palaces and pyramids, the temples of the Greek and the cathedrals of Christendom. In them is exemplified the power of men, the greatness of nations, the love of art and religious devotion. But the monument at Niagara has something of its own, more in accord with our present thoughts and tendencies. It is a monument worthy of our scientific age, a true monument of enlightenment and of peace. It signifies the subjugation of natural forces to the service of man, the discontinuance of barbarous methods, the relieving of millions from want and suffering." He had been a child in a small village in the mountains of what is now Croatia when he first saw a picture of a waterfall and told his uncle he would go to America and put it to work. He was 40 years old when it happened. The journey between those two moments, the schoolroom in Gospic, the power plant at Niagara, had taken him across an ocean, through failure and ditch digging and ridicule and a laboratory fire that took everything he had built with his hands. And yet here the water was, falling as it had always fallen, doing what he had imagined, as a boy, it could do. He stood at Niagara. He listened to the water. Outside, in the city to the south, the lights were on. The dream was complete. Or rather, this dream was complete. Because the mind that had imagined a wheel at Niagara when he was 9 years old was not a mind that stopped with completed dreams. It was already somewhere else. It was already thinking about wireless. About transmitting power not through wires but through the earth itself. About a tower that could send electricity to every corner of the world. The water fell. The turbines turned. The current moved. And somewhere inside a mind that had never once stopped asking what electricity could do next. The next question was already forming. For a time, around the turn of the century, the reputation of Nikola Tesla very nearly eclipsed that of Thomas Edison. Edison had given the world the practical incandescent lamp. But Tesla had devised the means to bring the electricity that would light those lamps to millions of homes across America and around the world, cheaply, efficiently, and over distances that would have made Edison's system impossible. Tesla was the toast of New York society. He threw lavish dinner parties at Delmonico's and at the Waldorf Astoria, the city's finest restaurants, where industrialists and writers and artists gathered around a man who seemed, in those years, to be producing miracles at a rate no one had seen since Edison himself in the great years of Menlo Park. The newspapers called him the Wizard of Electricity. For once, they were not exaggerating. His laboratory was the most extraordinary room in New York. He had been working out of a series of spaces in Manhattan through the late 1880s and into the 1890s, first at 175 Grand Street, then on South Fifth Avenue, then on East Houston Street. Each laboratory was larger and more ambitious than the last. Visitors who came were not prepared for what they found. In the center of the room, great coils of wire wound to specifications no one else fully understood, connected to capacitors and transformers and switching mechanisms of Tesla's own design. The whole apparatus hummed with contained energy, a sound that those who heard it described as both beautiful and slightly alarming, the way certain music is. When Tesla activated the coils, the room transformed. Crackling arcs of electricity 3 feet long leaped between the terminals. Glass tubes filled with gas glowed violet and green without any wire connecting them to a source, charged by the invisible field the coil had created in the room. And then Tesla himself would step into it. He would hold a tube in each hand, and as he walked between the electrified plates, the tubes came alive in his hands, blazing with light, powered entirely by the high-frequency current flowing through his own body. He had observed early in his experiments that high-frequency alternating current above a certain frequency did not produce the sensation of electric shock. Currents that would be lethal at lower frequencies could pass through the body without apparent harm. He experimented on himself regularly and claimed that daily applications of high voltage relieved his depression. Standing in his laboratory with fire running through him and lamps blazing in his hands, he was hard to argue with. Among the most famous visitors to that laboratory was a man who had been part of Tesla's life in a way the man himself did not know until they finally met. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, was by the 1890s the most famous writer in America, perhaps in the world. He was also a man fascinated by technology, an investor in new inventions, and a regular presence in the same New York social circles Tesla moved through. They met at the Players Club in Gramercy Park, the gentlemen's club that Tesla had joined in 1892 at the invitation of the architect Stanford White. And one evening, in that meeting, Tesla told Twain something that stopped the conversation. As a boy in Croatia, near death from cholera, 9 months bedridden, multiple times given up by the doctors around him, it had been Mark Twain's books, borrowed from the local library, that had captivated him enough to make him want to keep living. Twain, who had heard most things people could say to him and taken most of them in stride, was moved to tears. They became genuine friends. Twain visited the laboratory regularly in the years that followed, participating in experiments with the enthusiasm of a man who had never quite believed that science should be limited to scientists. On one occasion, Tesla invited Twain to stand on a mechanical oscillating platform he had built, a vibrating plate Tesla believed might have therapeutic value. Twain was reluctant at first, then delighted. He refused to step off it. Tesla, who understood physics rather better than Twain did, had been trying to warn him. The oscillator was also a highly effective laxative. Twain made a rapid and undignified exit from the laboratory. Tesla found this funnier than almost anything that had happened in years. But underneath the dinners and the demonstrations and the famous friends, the mind was already somewhere else. It was always somewhere else. The coils were extraordinary. The fame was real. The laboratory was genuinely the most advanced electrical research facility in the world. And none of it was what Tesla was actually thinking about. What he was thinking about was wireless. Not the transmission of signals, though that too was part of it. but the transmission of power. He had been developing the idea since the early 1890s, and in 1893, the same year as the Chicago World's Fair, he had announced it publicly in a lecture in St. Louis, the possibility of sending electrical power through the air, through the Earth itself, to any point on the globe, without a single wire. He filed patents covering wireless transmitters and receivers. He showed, in his laboratory, that a coil vibrating at one frequency would cause sparks to appear in other coils tuned to the same frequency across the room, energy transmitted through space, not through cable. He foresaw a day, he said, when messages and electric power would flow around the world without wires, when a ship at sea could receive position signals, when a businessman could dictate a message in New York and have it arrive in London in less time than it took to reach a local telephone operator. He was describing, in 1893, something very close to what we now call the Internet. He was 4 to 7 years ahead of the first commercial radio broadcast, 50 years ahead of the first television network. He continued working. The next laboratory was already being planned. The next experiment was already forming in the interior theater of his mind. And it would require more space, more altitude, and more electricity than anything he had yet attempted. In May 1899, Nikola Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs. He came for the altitude, and for the room, and for the electrical storms, the thunderstorms that rolled across the plains east of the Rockies with a frequency and a force that no coastal city could match. He had been thinking about the Earth as a conductor, not as a metaphor, as a literal physical fact. His theory was this: if the Earth was a sphere of finite and measurable dimensions, and if it conducted electricity, then it had natural resonant frequencies, just as a bell has a frequency at which it rings most fully. If you could introduce an electrical signal at that frequency, at sufficient power, the signal would not merely travel through the Earth. It would resonate. It would build. It could, in theory, be received anywhere on the surface of the planet. This was not a fantasy. It was a hypothesis. A testable, scientific hypothesis. And to test it, he needed to build something no one had ever built before. The laboratory went up quickly on the plains at the eastern edge of the city. A wooden building, barn-like in structure, unremarkable from outside, except for the tower that rose from its center, topped by a copper sphere, and connected by cable to the coil inside. The coil was the largest Tesla had ever built. 15 meters in diameter. 9 feet high. Designed to operate in the megavolts range, more electrical power concentrated in one place than had ever been assembled in a laboratory before. The El Paso Electric Company supplied the current free of charge, apparently unaware of quite what Tesla intended to do with it. The experiments began. Outside the laboratory, things happened that no one in the quiet town of Colorado Springs had seen before. Sparks appeared at people's feet as they walked near the building. Blue coronas formed around horses' hooves in the fields nearby. Butterflies, several witnesses later reported, flew in circles around the tower, their wings outlined in electrical fire. Water pipes in the area crackled with unexpected current. Inside, the coil was tuned, and adjusted, and tuned again. Tesla kept a diary throughout his time in Colorado, a notebook of some 500 pages and 200 drawings, recording every experiment with the methodical precision of a man who knew that what he was doing was unprecedented enough to require an exact record. On a summer night, the date is not certain, Tesla was at his instruments when something arrived in the receiver. A pattern. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Not the random noise of atmospheric electricity. Something that, to his ear, trained as it was to distinguish signal from noise, seemed organized. He wrote about it carefully, noting that the signals were unlike any he had received before. He speculated, in a letter to a reporter, that he might have intercepted communication from another planet. The newspapers, predictably, ran with this. Whether what he heard was truly anomalous, or whether it was the radio experiments that Marconi was conducting simultaneously across the Atlantic, experiments that used a pattern very similar to what Tesla heard, is something that was never resolved. Tesla himself was careful in his language about it. He did not claim certainty. He said what it had seemed like to him, in that room, on that night, at the edge of the world. And then the lightning. He built up the power in the coil to levels that the surrounding air could no longer contain. And the coil released it. Artificial lightning. Bolts 30, 40, 50 feet long, eventually, at the maximum, 135 feet, erupting from the terminal at the top of the tower in great branching structures of white fire, each one accompanied by a crack of thunder that rattled the windows of buildings 15 miles away. It was, by the accounts of those who witnessed it, from a safe distance across the plains, and a safe distance, in this case, meant a considerable one, the most extraordinary man-made spectacle anyone had ever seen. In the laboratory itself, the effect was total. The air smelled of ozone. The coil sang. The thunder arrived as a physical pressure felt in the chest and the stomach before it reached the ears. Ball lightning, a phenomenon so rare that its existence had been disputed, appeared spontaneously within the room. Floating, drifting, glowing faintly, moving as if guided by something no one in the room could see. Tesla described it simply, in his diary, as a most beautiful sight. At some point in the experiments, Tesla pushed the power beyond what the town could sustain. He inadvertently overloaded the generator at the El Paso Electric Company. The power went out in Colorado Springs. All of it. The streets went dark. The machines stopped. The company was not pleased. They suspended his free electricity. Tesla repaired their generator personally before resuming his experiments. He made no apology. It is not clear one was offered. In January 1900, after 7 months in Colorado, Tesla packed his notebooks and returned to New York. He believed he had proved his central hypothesis, that the Earth could carry an electrical signal at resonance, and that the signal could be received at great distances. Whether his interpretation of his measurements was correct is something that scientists have debated ever since. What is not debated is that what he built in Colorado was real, that the forces he worked with were genuine, and that the vision that drove him was coherent and serious. He came back to New York with 500 pages of notes and a plan for what to build next. The plan was large. It was the largest thing he had ever imagined. And he was already in the process of finding the money for it. There is a photograph from Colorado Springs that is among the most reproduced images in the history of technology. Tesla is seated in a chair in his laboratory. Around him, arcing from the coil behind, are bolts of artificial lightning, dozens of them, filling the room like a second sky. He is reading a book. He is utterly calm. The lightning he had spent his whole life chasing is so familiar now, so thoroughly understood, that it fills the room around him and he does not look up from the page. He has made the electricity his. Outside, on the plains of Colorado, the wind moved through the dark. The stars were very clear at that altitude. And in his laboratory, a man from a village in the mountains of Licker sat in a chair surrounded by lightning and thought about what to build next. He returned from Colorado Springs in January 1900 with 500 pages of notes, 200 drawings, and an absolutely clear idea of what to build next. The idea had been forming for years, since the first wireless experiments in his New York laboratory, since the 1893 lecture in St. Louis where he had first announced the possibility of sending power and signals without wires. Colorado Springs had been the test. What he would build now on Long Island would be the proof. He called it the World Wireless System. It was not a modest name, but it was an accurate one. What Tesla envisioned was this: a tower, a single tower, on the flat ground of Long Island, that would transmit electrical signals and electrical power itself to any point on the surface of the Earth. Not through cables strung between poles. Not through the copper wires that currently connected city to city across the continent. Through the Earth itself. Through the natural conductivity of the planet, using the resonance he believed he had demonstrated in the lightning-filled laboratory on the Colorado Plains. A person in New York, he wrote, would be able to dictate instructions and have them appear in type at their office in London in less time than it would take to reach a local telephone operator. He imagined the transmission of images. He imagined navigation signals for ships at sea. He imagined, most radically of all, that the electrical power itself could be sent, that any person anywhere in the world, with a simple receiving device, could draw electrical energy from the system without paying for it. Free electricity. For everyone. Everywhere. This was not a utopian fantasy dressed up as science. It was a specific engineering proposal, grounded in experiments he had actually conducted, based on principles he had measured and recorded in 500 pages of careful notes. He had done science. Now he needed the money. In March 1901, J.P. Morgan agreed to invest $150,000. Morgan was the most powerful banker in America, a man who had consolidated industries and moved markets with the sureness of someone who understood that the future was simply whatever the most powerful people decided it would be. He funded the project expecting a wireless telegraph system, something that would compete with Guglielmo Marconi, who was already transmitting signals across the Atlantic. This was not small. This was a significant business opportunity. Tesla's system, Morgan believed, would outperform Marconi's. He did not fully understand, at this stage, that Tesla's vision went considerably further than telegraphy. Tesla purchased 200 acres of land in Shoreham, a quiet community on the north shore of Long Island, 65 miles from the city. He named the site Wardenclyffe, after the developer from whom he had bought the land. He hired Stanford White to design the buildings. Stanford White was, at that point, one of the most celebrated architects in America, a man whose buildings defined the look of Gilded Age New York. The brick laboratory building that White designed at Wardenclyffe is the only structure from that era still standing on the site today. Construction began in September 1901. The tower rose from the flat Long Island ground through the autumn and into the winter, a wooden frame, treated against the weather, climbing to 187 feet and topped with a copper hemisphere 68 feet in diameter and weighing 55 tons. Below the tower, a shaft was sunk 120 feet into the earth, and from the base of the shaft, iron pipes were driven 300 feet further in all directions. A root system of metal reaching deep into the ground, designed to give the machine, in Tesla's own words, a grip on the earth so the whole of this globe can quiver. It was the largest, most ambitious structure Nikola Tesla had ever built. And then, in December 1901, a single news item arrived in the newspapers. Guglielmo Marconi had transmitted the letter S in Morse code across the Atlantic, from Cornwall in England to Newfoundland in Canada. The first transatlantic wireless transmission. The world's press celebrated it. Morgan's attention shifted. Not immediately, not completely, but the question that had been implicit in his investment from the beginning was now unavoidable. If Marconi had already done it, what exactly was he funding Tesla to do? Tesla explained. He was not building a telegraph system. He was building something much larger, a system that would transmit not just signals but power. that would not merely send a message but change the relationship between energy and geography forever. Morgan replied, in essence, that this was not what they had agreed to. He wanted a wireless telegraph. Marconi had built a wireless telegraph. Tesla was proposing to go somewhere else entirely. Why, Morgan reportedly asked, should he fund something from which every person on Earth could draw electricity without paying for it? Tesla had no satisfying answer. At least not one that made business sense. Morgan withdrew his additional support. He had already paid $150,000. He would pay no more. Tesla spent the next years writing letters. To Morgan, to Morgan's associates, to other wealthy men whose names he could reach, to anyone who might understand what it was that he was trying to build and why it mattered. Most of the letters went unanswered. The ones that were answered were polite and non-committal. The world had seen Marconi succeed with a simpler system. Investors followed Marconi. They put their money into something that had already worked, not something that might work if the right conditions could be met. Tesla continued construction as long as he could. He mortgaged the Wardenclyffe property to cover his mounting debts at the Waldorf Astoria, where he was living and where the bills had been accumulating for years. When one mortgage was not enough, he took a second. He wrote to Morgan again. Morgan had died, so he wrote to Morgan's son Jack. The son did not fund the project either. The whispering campaign that Tesla's biographers recorded had begun to circle around him in those years. If his plan was such a good thing, why would not Morgan see it through? He is the last man to let a good thing go. These were not the questions of people who wanted answers. They were the questions of people who had already decided on the answer. In 1905, the project came to a halt. The tower stood incomplete. The laboratory building was abandoned. The staff had found employment elsewhere. Tesla himself suffered what his biographer Mark Seifer describes as a nervous breakdown in 1906, a collapse of some kind, the details of which Tesla kept private with the particular privacy of a man who does not discuss what he cannot fix. He recovered, after a fashion. He continued. But Wardenclyffe had taken something from him that did not fully come back. Not the ideas never left. Not the capacity for work, he continued working. But something about his relationship with the world, some residual belief that if you demonstrated something was possible and important and real, the world would eventually find a way to let it be built. That belief did not survive Wardenclyffe intact. In 1917, the tower was demolished. Tesla was not present. He was in a hotel in New York. He was 61 years old. He had been living in a series of hotels, moving when the debts became impossible, leaving behind unpaid bills and the quiet bewilderment of staff who understood they were dealing with someone who had once been very famous and was now something more complicated than famous. The tower at Wardenclyffe was taken down and sold for scrap metal. The copper, the iron pipes below the ground, all of it reduced to its constituent materials and sold to pay debts. The greatest instrument Tesla had ever built was demolished without ceremony. He had never transmitted a single watt of power through it. The years that followed were not empty. Tesla was not a man who could be empty. He opened offices in Manhattan, at 165 Broadway, then the Metropolitan Life Tower, briefly at the Woolworth Building before he could no longer afford the rent, then at 8 West 40th Street. Each address was a smaller room in a building with a shorter name than the one before. He continued to file patents. He invented things, real things, some of which would be recognized and used long after he was gone. He announced, on his birthdays, inventions that were always imminent and always revolutionary, a particle beam weapon that would end war, a motor that ran on cosmic rays, a system that could detect distant objects by bouncing waves off them and reading what returned. Some of these were real work pushed to extreme speculation. Some were the claims of a mind that had always moved faster than what could be proven, and that now, without a laboratory and without resources and without the collaboration that the best work requires, was running ahead of itself in a way that was harder and harder to distinguish from simply running away. The newspapers reported his birthday announcements with decreasing seriousness. A gentle, faintly pitying tone crept into the coverage. The tone used for a man who was once remarkable and was now considered, sadly, a little lost. He was not lost. He was the same person he had always been. The world had simply moved on to other concerns, other inventors, other stories. The invisible machinery he had built was running perfectly, everywhere, without him. It had simply stopped needing him present. And then, in the year he died, the year his body was found in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker, the world corrected one of its longest errors. On the 21st of June, 1943, 5.5 months after Tesla's death, the United States Supreme Court ruled on a patent case that had been working its way through the courts for years. The Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company had been claiming infringement of its fundamental radio patents. The government, defending itself, challenged the validity of those patents. The Supreme Court examined the prior art. It examined Tesla's patent number 645,576, applied for in September 1897, 4 years before Marconi's system. It found that Tesla had described the essential four-circuit tune system that underpinned radio transmission, had described it and patented it before Marconi had done anything with it. The court declared Marconi's fundamental radio patents invalid on the grounds that Tesla, and Oliver Lodge and John Stone, had anticipated the invention years before. In patent law, to anticipate an invention means to have already invented it. Tesla had invented radio before Marconi invented radio. The Supreme Court said so. In writing. On the record. The ruling came 5.5 months after the man to whom it applied had died alone in his hotel room. Nobody told him. He was already gone. There is a kind of silence that descends at the end of a very long story that did not end quite the way it should have. Not dramatic silence. Not operatic. Just the ordinary quiet of a thing that cannot be undone. The tower had been sold for scrap in 1917. The record had been set straight in 1943. Between those two events was a life, a man moving through the city in a series of diminishing rooms and growing debts, feeding pigeons in the park every afternoon, thinking about electricity and what it could still be made to do, writing letters that mostly went unanswered, keeping the window of his hotel room open for a white pigeon with gray-tipped wings who came every day and then, one day, did not come anymore. He kept the window open anyway. Outside, the city ran on his current. It always had. It still does. And in the quiet of a room on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker, a man who had once filled a laboratory with artificial lightning sat in a chair in the dark and watched the lights of the city he had made. There is a particular quality of life that belongs to people who have given everything they had to an idea that the world was not quite ready for. It is not bitterness, exactly. It is not defeat. It is something quieter than either, a kind of settling. The way a house settles on its foundations over years and decades, until it has found its permanent relationship with the ground beneath it. Nikola Tesla settled, in his final decade, into 2 rooms on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker. He had been evicted from other hotels before this one. From the St. Regis, where management had grown exasperated by the flocks of pigeons he invited through the open windows, the nests he built for them, the special seed mixes he ordered from the kitchen, the dirt on the windowsills and the linen that the maids quietly endured for as long as they could. From the Hotel Pennsylvania. From the Hotel Governor Clinton. Each time the pigeons proved too much for the patience of management, and each time Tesla packed what remained of his belongings and moved somewhere else. In 1934, a settlement from the Westinghouse Electric Company, a quiet act of institutional acknowledgement that they owed this man more than they had paid, allowed him to move to the Hotel New Yorker and to stay. The company paid his rent. They paid him $125 a month. It was not much. It was enough to keep him in the 2 rooms that would be his home for the rest of his life. His daily routine in those final years was simple in the way that things become simple when everything unnecessary has fallen away. He woke. He worked at the desk in room 3328, the study where the notebooks were kept. He ate, in the careful, minimal way that had characterized his relationship with food for most of his adult life. Warm milk, bread, a little honey, sometimes a small amount of fish. He calculated, as he always had, the cubic volume of his food before eating it. He required 18 napkins at the table. He walked around certain objects 3 times. These were not new habits. They had always been with him, these private rituals of order, the small structuring of a world that without such structure would be simply too much. And then, in the afternoon, he walked. Every day, in almost any weather, until the accident of 1937 made walking more difficult, Tesla walked the several blocks from the hotel on 34th Street to Bryant Park, between 40th and 42nd Streets. He moved slowly through the Midtown streets. Tall even in his 80s. Dressed carefully. Carrying seed and bread scraps. At the corner of 40th Street and 6th Avenue, the southwestern corner of the park, beneath the trees near the New York Public Library, the pigeons gathered. They knew him. He knew them. He had been feeding pigeons since at least the 1920s, first from the steps of the public library, then from his hotel windows, then here, in the park, daily. He had nursed injured birds back to health in his room, spending, on one occasion, more than $2,000 building a special device to hold a bird comfortably while her broken wing and leg healed. $2,000. In a decade when he was living on $125 a month from a company that felt some residual obligation to him. He spent it without hesitation. Among all the birds, over all the years, one had been singular. Pure white. Light gray tips on her wings. She came to his window every day. She followed him, he said, when he moved between rooms. She knew him in the particular way that a creature knows someone who has seen it clearly. He spoke about her without apology, near the end of his life, to a reporter who was interviewing him for one of his annual birthday press conferences, those gatherings he held each July 10th, inviting journalists to his rooms to hear about the inventions that were always just about to be completed. He said, "I have been feeding pigeons, thousands of them, for years. But there was one, a beautiful bird, pure white with light gray tips on her wings. I had only to wish and call her and she would come flying to me. I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman. And she loved me. As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life. She had died some years before. He still came to the park every afternoon. He still kept the window open. The birthday press conferences were themselves a kind of monument to persistence. Every year, on July 10th, from his 75th birthday in 1931, when he appeared on the cover of Time magazine and received congratulatory telegrams from Albert Einstein, through the years of declining finances and declining fame, he gathered reporters in his hotel rooms and announced what was coming. At 79 he described an earthquake machine. At 77 he claimed to be on the verge of a new form of energy after 35 years of work. At 75, he described a motor that ran on cosmic rays. At 81, he announced a particle beam weapon, a device he called Teleforce, that could, he said, bring down a fleet of 10,000 aircraft at a distance of 200 miles. Some of what he announced was real work pushed into territories that had become speculative. Some was the output of a mind that had always run ahead of what could be built, and that now, without a laboratory or resources, was running ahead in ways that were harder to follow from outside. The reporters came back every year. Not out of cruelty. Not quite out of pity. Out of something more complicated, the way you keep returning to a place that used to mean something, even after what made it remarkable has changed. They were, most of them, simply too young to have been there for the White City, for Niagara, for the demonstrations at the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. They knew Tesla's name. They did not quite know what the name meant. In the fall of 1937, late one night, Tesla left the hotel on one of his regular walks, heading for St. Patrick's Cathedral and the library to check on the birds. Crossing a street a few blocks from the hotel, he was struck by a taxicab. He was 81 years old. He was thrown to the ground. 3 ribs were broken. His back was severely damaged. He refused to see a doctor. This was not stubbornness, exactly. It was the same deep distrust of medical authority that had been with him most of his adult life, rooted in part in his lifelong fear of germs, in part in a private certainty that he understood his own body better than anyone else could. He went back to the hotel. He treated himself, in his room, with the same self-contained practicality with which he had always approached obstacles. He never fully recovered. He grew lighter. He moved more carefully. He fed the pigeons by proxy on the days when walking was too difficult, sending a messenger to carry the seed to the corner at 40th and 6th, to stand where he usually stood, to do for the birds what he could no longer always do himself. He continued to work. The notebooks on his desk kept filling. Ideas arrived in the night, as they always had, and were written down in that careful hand before they could escape. There are people who say that Nikola Tesla was a man who had stopped being productive by the end. That the final decade was only repetition and decline. Those people have not read the notebooks. The notebooks, now held in the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade, part of an archive of over 160,000 documents included in the UNESCO Memory of the World program, show a mind that was still moving. Still turning problems over. Still asking what electricity could do that it was not yet being asked to do. The problems were not always solvable. The resources were not there. The laboratory was gone and would not be rebuilt. But the thinking was there. The thinking was always there. On the 7th of January, 1943, Nikola Tesla died in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. The time of death was estimated at 10:30 in the evening. The cause was coronary thrombosis. He was found the following morning by a maid named Alice Monaghan, who entered despite the Do Not Disturb sign that had been on the door for 3 days. He was lying peacefully. The room was tidy, as it always was. On the desk, the notebooks. He had been working. The funeral was held on January 12th at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Upper Manhattan, one of the largest cathedrals in the world. More than 2,000 people attended. New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia read the eulogy over the radio, so that it could be heard beyond the cathedral, beyond the city, by anyone who was listening. Tesla's casket was draped with the flags of the United States and Yugoslavia, the two countries that had, between them, made him what he was. Telegrams of condolence arrived from Vice President Wallace, from the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, from the British government. A wreath came from King Peter II of Yugoslavia. Nobel Prize winners served as pallbearers. And outside the cathedral, on the streets of a city he had helped to light, the ordinary life of New York continued. The buses running, the elevators rising and falling, the motors turning in 1,000 buildings, all of it powered by the alternating current he had conceived in a park in Budapest 61 years before. His ashes were placed, eventually, in a gold-plated sphere that now rests on a marble pedestal in the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade. The archive around it, over 160,000 documents, the accumulated thought of a life spent asking what the invisible world could do, is listed in the UNESCO Memory of the World program. In 1960, 17 years after his death, the General Conference on Weights and Measures named the International Unit of Magnetic Flux Density the Tesla. So that his name is spoken now, in every physics laboratory on Earth, every time the measurement is taken. Every time. We began in this room. January 1943. 33rd floor. The window opened just a little against the cold. The city below, spread out in the dark, running on his current. We have come a long way since then, back to the mountains, to the village and the storm, to the cat and the sparks and the boy asking his father what electricity was. Across an ocean, through laboratories and lecture halls and a park in Budapest at dusk, where a young man drew something in the sand and changed the world without knowing it quite yet. Through triumph. Through a tower that rose from Long Island and was torn down for scrap. Through the long, quiet years of feeding birds in a city park and keeping a window open and working in the dark on problems that would not be fully solved in his lifetime. We have come the full distance. And now we are back. The city outside that window, the city that was always there, always running, always lit. Every lamp on every street powered by the system he designed. Every motor in every elevator turning on the principle he conceived while reciting poetry. Every radio, every television, every device that transmits a signal through the air, built on foundations laid by a man in a laboratory on Fifth Avenue who passed electricity through his own body to show an audience what was possible. He did not receive everything he deserved. He did not live to hear the Supreme Court restore his priority. He did not see the unit of measurement named for him. He did not see the world eventually arrive at the question of wireless power that he had been asking since 1893. But he built it anyway. Not because he was sure of recognition. Not because he calculated the return on his investment of 60 years of work. But because the machine worked. Because the current flowed. Because the idea was real, and real things do not require the inventor's presence to function. There is something about this particular story that resists the ordinary consolations. He was not properly rewarded. He was not properly remembered. The world moved on without him in the particular way it moves on past the people who made it possible, with the comfortable forgetfulness of someone who has learned to use a room and stopped thinking about who built it. And yet, every light still on in the city below his window is his light. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Literally. His system. His current. His frequency. 60 cycles per second, as he specified. The city is running on what he made. He sat in his chair by the window. The milk on the table, cooling. The notebooks on the desk. The window opened just a little against the January dark. Below, the city stretched away in every direction, towers and avenues and the lights of a million lives going on in their ordinary ways, each one burning electricity the way they breathed air. Without thinking. Without remembering. He was not bitter about this. Or if he was, he kept it private, the way he kept most things private that could not be fixed. He had simply done what he was made to do. He had asked what electricity was, a boy in a dark room with a sparking cat, and he had spent the rest of his life answering. The answer had lit the world. Outside, it was cold. January in New York is always cold. The wind came off the Hudson and moved through the streets below in the particular way of winter wind in cities, channeled between buildings, finding the angles that amplify it, arriving at windows with the suggestion of all the open country it has crossed to get here. The pigeon on the windowsill shifted in the draft. Or perhaps there was no pigeon. Perhaps it was only the wind. It does not matter. What matters is the window was open. What matters is the light was on. What matters is the city below was exactly as he had imagined it, not the specific buildings, not the specific streets, but the principle of it. A world that does not have to be dark. Close your eyes. You are already most of the way there. Let the city go. Let the hotel go. Let the story, which has carried you from a thunderstorm in 1856 to a quiet room in 1943, settle gently around you like a coat at the end of a long walk. The current is still moving. 60 times per second, as it always has. The water still falls at Niagara. The turbines still turn. The light in the room you are lying in, wherever you are, whatever room, whatever night, is his.